Our next speaker, Farahana Mayer, and she is a senior researcher in Islamic studies in the theology department of Quilliam Foundation in London, which stands for religious freedom, equality, human rights, and democracy. Thank you.
So I start with the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, and by thanking Professor Capello and Caritas in Veritate for inviting Quilliam Foundation to participate in this distinguished gathering. It has been an intellectual and spiritual joy and profoundly moving to hear the presentations over these 2 days, as well as having discussions with other participants. I've been invited to respond to Professor Grimm's paper, and as I do so, I hope that my comments will highlight some common ground in the Christian and Quranic concepts of mercy, love, justice, and truth, which are among the pivotal divine qualities and attributes designated by the names of God in the Quran. I will also highlight religious pluralism in the Quran and briefly discuss God's nature and the hermeneutical role that must be reaffirmed for the divine attributes in the critical domain of interpreting and implementing the Quran and the Sharia. As you listen, please bear in mind the current global situation pertinent particularly to the Muslims and Islam. That is the background to this. Thank you, Professor Grimm, for your inspiring words and work. At the beginning, you quoted Pope Paul VI's assertion that there can be no compulsion in matters of religion. This is a crucial Quranic principle stated in Surah 2, verse 256. There is no compulsion in religion. La ikraha fid din. This Quranic phrase is followed immediately by the statement that rightness and right conduct has been made distinct from transgression, and that whoever denies false deities and believes in God has grasped the firmer hold it will never break. This all affirms that people are free to choose their way of life. In this verse, the negation of compulsion is rooted in man's capacity to discern for himself what way is better. Surah 10, verse 9 states that had your Lord willed, then those who are on earth, all of them, altogether, would have believed. Will you then force people until they become believers? There could hardly be a clearer forbidding of coercion in faith than this. Since God himself respects freedom of belief, how should any human seek to compel another to believe? Professor Grimm's quote from section 11 of Dignitatis Humanae about Christ refusing to impose the truth by force but drawing all men to himself, lifted up on the cross, reminds me of Surah 9, verse 1-8 of the Quran, which states, "There has come unto you a messenger from among yourselves, for whom the distress which you have is hard to bear." The word distress has the connotation in Arabic of sin, the distress caused by sin, which will add, I think does add to the redemptive nature of the empathy, because this is a description of empathy for the pains of humanity felt by the one sent by God, the Rasul, the Angelos. It is related that Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, who was the 6th-generation grandson of the Prophet and one of the Muslim leaders and scholars most respected by diverse Muslim denominations, that he commented on this verse saying, God clothed him, the messenger, from his own quality of pity, compassion, and mercy, and sent him forth to creation as a faithful ambassador. In other words, the one sent forth by God is an ontological, an existential ambassador of the divine qualities. While these Quranic and commentarial words are understood by Muslims primarily as a reference to the Prophet of Islam, it is clear that they are also fully and totally applicable to the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, who embodied divine empathy and salvific compassion as described by Pope Paul VI's words. Professor Grimm identified certain sectors of society and societal causes as the increasingly major obstacles to religious freedom in many places now, rather than the state. The state does still go against religious freedom in certain countries like China, witness the terrible atrocities perpetrated by communist China against the Tibetan people and culture and religion. And just the other day, as I was flying over, I read in an article reported in The Guardian online that there is an anti-cross campaign in China. About over 1,000 churches have been affected, and Christian human rights lawyers are being imprisoned and then made to confess on TV that what they're doing is wrong. So there is still state persecution, and there are other examples that I could give, but I won't. But yes, the 6 social hostilities that the 2014 Pew study identified are indeed significant and alarming factors impeding religious freedom. In non-Muslim majority countries, evident Muslims like women who wear either the headscarf or are fully veiled, or Asian men with long beards, are at the receiving end of increasing anti-Muslim sentiment. At the same time, as a Muslim woman, I'm also very aware of the endemic harassment that women, Muslim and non-Muslim, face on the streets in places like Cairo, Pakistan, or India, to mention just a few. This harassment can be verbal or physical and violent. It can be used by some men to terrorize women off the street and out of the public sphere. Organizations like Harasmap are working hard to counter this discrimination. A number of the organizations that I'm going to refer to, I have the links online in the online links in the paper, which you will have. Like other Muslims, I'm also profoundly horrified by the unspeakable atrocities being perpetrated specifically against the Yazidis, and by the genocide against Christians in the Levant and elsewhere by terrorists who claim to be Muslims, yet who, as everyone knows, are also killing innumerable Muslims. As for intra-Muslim sectarian violence, it has been the bane throughout Muslim history. There is no way to square all of the above with the Quranic principle of non-compulsion noted earlier. But let me now highlight some current international efforts being made to uphold religious pluralism and freedom of belief, efforts and endeavors initiated by Muslims. The Mauritanian professor of Islamic studies at King Abdulaziz University in Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya, and leading figures of the Muslim world came together at a forum for promoting peace in Muslim societies, hosted in Abu Dhabi in March 2014. Such initiatives to promote internecine peace are much needed and welcome. In December 2014, the Forum for Promoting Peace went on to cooperate with Religions for Peace to host a conference entitled Religions Working Together to Confront Extremism and Violence. Furthermore, the Forum for Promoting Peace, together with the Ministry of Endowments and Islamic Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco, have also taken the vital step of promoting interreligious peace and religious freedom through the protection of the rights of minorities in predominantly Muslim countries. King Mohammed VI of Morocco hosted this groundbreaking conference in Marrakesh just last month, at which Professor Grimm was present. The conference produced the Marrakesh Declaration, which is based on the Medinan constitution developed by the Prophet. And it is a very welcome initiative, which we hope will continue to be refined and developed. In Jordan, the Royal Al Bayt Institute is overseeing projects to counter extremism and to increase interfaith rapprochement. Their A Common Word project is well known to Christian and Jewish leaders around the globe. Based in Britain, the Quilliam Foundation, for whom I work, seeks to promote pluralism, human rights, and secular democracy. It is inspiring progressive change, particularly religious reform within Islam, and it is also engaged in countering extremism and the radical narrative. I have here some books, and I hope you'll have some time to look at the kind of work that we are doing. South Asian militant groups and global jihad, pulling together to defeat terror, women and the appeal of Islamic State and how to counter it, and non-compulsion in religion. The most recent publication by the head of our theology department, Sheikh Dr. Hussama Hassan, is entitled From Dhimmitu to Democracy, and traces the various legal changes made within Muslim history. The theological and juristic points which I will make below build on this history of legal changes within Islam, this history of reform. So Professor Grimm cited His Holiness Pope Francis as stating, Jesus reminded us that we have God as our common Father, and that this makes us spiritual brothers and sisters, a universal fraternity. This plucked in me the Quranic chord of Surah 4, verse 1, which states, O humankind, be aware of God, who created you from one soul, which succinctly underlines the existential equality or universal fraternity of all people in the eyes of God. I've put up a few more Quranic verses on religious pluralism. Surah 5, verse 48 states, to each of you we have given a law and a way, and had God willed, he would have made you all one community. But he did not, in order to try you in that which he has given you. So vie with each other in good works. Unto God is the return of all of you, and then he will inform you about that wherein you differed. So this verse explicitly teaches that the differences between religious communities are God-given, and that any competitiveness between different religious communities should only be to see who can do greater good. Surah 2, verse 62 states, Verily, those who believe, and those who are Jews, and the Christians, and the Sabaeans, whosoever believes in God and the last day, and does good, they shall have their reward with their Lord. And at Surah 2, verse 285, we read that those who believe make no distinction between any of God's messengers. Elsewhere, in Surah 109, verse 6, it is stated that the Prophet should say to those who do not believe in him and his faith, You have your religion, and I have mine. Very reminiscent of live and let live. Surah 30, verse 22 tells us that among God's signs are the differences in your languages and your colors. The diversity of human cultures and communities are affirmed as manifestations of the richness of God's creative action. Regarding our responsibility for others and the world, to which His Holiness Pope Francis drew attention in his words, we have a shared responsibility for others in the world. According to Surah 2, verse 30, which I seem not to have put up, Adam, and thereby all humanity, have been created as the vicegerent of God on earth, Khalifatullah fil ard. This is not a political concept here. This is the concept of man, the human being, as the vicegerent of God on earth with all the concomitant responsibilities. I'm going to unpack this verse and the two that follow a bit more, as they contain a remarkable summation of our human state and need. But as a prelude to that, may I point out that while in Christianity God's nature is revealed in Christ, in Islam the divine nature is designated by the names of God. And I've put up some of the key names here. I've color-coded them because I've given you the translation and the transliteration first, and each name unit is in one color. So we have these names, which are among the foremost. Al-Hayy, the living, which implies the sanctity of all life. I don't know how any terrorist who calls himself a Muslim squares what he does with this. We have the key names, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the gracious, the merciful. These are the names that I used at the beginning of my talk, and which Muslims use countless times to initiate anything that they're doing, be it addressing a wonderful forum or something so simple as commencing a meal or beginning a journey. And they are, I'm going to actually, let me not jump ahead. I'll talk about the concept of mercy in more detail shortly. So we have peace, as-salam. If God is peace, violence does not lead to him. And any act of violence violates this aspect of the divine. Justice, al-adl. The concept of justice in the Arabic word, adl, Arabic is polysemous, so one word has multiple meanings. It is not only justice, it is also equality and indiscriminateness. So everyone is the same, male, female, Muslim or not. The holy, the devoted in love. I will talk more about that. So you can read the rest there. They actually tally with some of the qualities you quoted from Galatians very much. Turning to the verses which I wish to unpack, which is Surah 2, verse 30. We read, And when your Lord said to the angels, Verily I am placing in the earth a vicegerent. They said, Are you going to place therein one who will make mischief therein and shed blood, while we hymn your praises and sanctify you? God said, Indeed, I know what you do not. And God taught Adam the names, all of them. Then he presented them to the angels and said, "Inform me of the names of these things if you are truthful." They said, "Glory to you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us." So God announces to the angels the creation of a vicegerent on earth, namely the human being. The angels respond with alarm that this being will generate corruption and shed blood, and ask why God would place such a vicegerent on earth. So God indicates that there is a secret wisdom in this, and goes on to teach the human being knowledge of all the names, which is to say knowledge of the identity and character of all things. Among all the names taught to Adam are undoubtedly the names of God himself, and that is the secret wisdom in this, embedded in the human. For it is the divine qualities given in the divine names that will overcome the corruption and bloodshed that the human being unleashes in the world of which he is vicegerent. Professor Grimm drew attention to Galatians 5:23 and how there is no law against love, joy, peace, and patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, and gentleness. And as shown, these are designated divine qualities in the Quran. And speaking as a Muslim, I advocate that the divine names need to be reaffirmed as the paramount hermeneutical principles of Muslim interpretation and implementation of the Quran and of the Sharia. God's names and the values that they designate are the measure which must govern Muslim scriptural understanding and religious laws and customs. Logically, what is in harmony with the divine names should take precedence over that which is not in harmony with them. The ideology of Daesh, ISIL, ISIS, is in violation of the divine names left, right, and center. Absolutely. So I could say a lot about it, but because this is the essence of the research that I'm engaged in currently, and hopefully maybe in a year or two, or maybe less, I'll hold up another book here, and it'll be about this. Moving beyond religion to life in general, wherever we find God's qualities, there is God's presence, whether or not he is formally identified or acknowledged as that. His attributes enable us to recognize God in other religions and outside of religion too. Focusing now on mercy, in the Divas in Misericordiae, quote given in Professor Grimm's paper, it is noticeable how Pope John Paul II positioned mercy and justice, and also how he used mercy and love interchangeably. The Arabic word rahma and its verbal associates, such as the names ar-Rahman and ar-Rahim, denote mercy, compassion, care, graciousness, and kindness. In addition, from the same verbal root, you have the words for womb, rahim, which brings into the picture the indiscriminate, all-encompassing maternal mercy, which is nothing other than love. Yesterday, Monsignor Anthony noted the same thing with regard to the Hebrew word for mercy. But the word love is not absent from the Quran, as some critics seem to think. There are numerous instances of the verb habba, to love, used with reference to God and the believers. To give one example, in Surah 2, verse 195, Muslims are exhorted to spend of their wealth for the sake of God and to do good. The verse ends with the affirmation that God loves those who do good. Spend in the way of God, which is what many of you are doing here in your organizations. Spend in the way of God and do not be thrown into perdition by your hands. Do good. Verily, God loves those who do good. There is another verb that is used in the Quran to denote love and intense devoted affection, wadda. Surah 85:14 designates God as al-Wadud, which I, to convey the fuller implications of the word, translate as the devoted in love. God is the devoted in love. The word mawadda is also used to describe familial love in Surah 42:23 and Surah 30:21, where it is used alongside with mercy. We have placed between you spouses love and mercy, which is something our companions here who work with couples will be interested to hear. Then in Surah 5, verse 1 to 8, 82 rather, we read that the Muslims are told they will not find any people more likely to feel mawadda, this intense, devoted affection towards them, other than those who are Christians, an-Nasara. Indeed, you will find that the closest of them, of people, in love towards those who believe, are those who call themselves An-Nasara. Returning to Rahmah, this divine quality of mercy is linked to God through a unique formulation in the Quran, which occurs twice, both times in Surah 6, once at verse 12 and the second time at verse 54. No other quality is described in this particular way in the Quran. Verse 12 says, "Say, to whom belongs all that is in the heavens and on earth?" Say, to God. He has inscribed mercy upon himself. And in 54, when those who believe in our signs come to you, say, "Peace upon you. Your Lord has inscribed mercy upon himself." Now, the relevant Arabic phrase, "Kataba ala nafsihi rahma," is usually translated as "he has made mercy incumbent upon himself," or "he has prescribed mercy for himself," both of which are perfectly correct linguistically. However, to my mind, in this case, the more literal rendition, which I use, conveys more fully the spiritual significance of the verse. Mercy is not just made incumbent upon God by God, it is written into his very substance. It is profoundly intrinsic to God. There is one more reference on mercy that I should like to share with you, and then I'm winding up. This is a divine dictum, which I will paraphrase here for brevity, which goes through a conversation that God has with a soul, in which God remonstrates that the soul did not visit him when he was ill, that he did not feed him, God, or give God to drink when God asked him for food and drink. And the soul says, "When would you have been in such a situation, God?" The divine reply indicates different people on earth who had been in those situations. And God states that had the soul visited or fed those people, he would have found God there. This story always reminds me totally of Christ's teaching recorded in Matthew 25, 41 to 45. "Inasmuch as you did it not to the least of my brothers, you did it not to me." There are many references for the precedence of mercy, both in the Quran and other canonical texts of Islam. It is my hope that what I have shared today has demonstrated the profound propinquity between the comprehensive divine rahmah in Islam and the Christian concepts of mercy and love. As vicegerents of God on earth, the extension of the divine rahmah on earth through our lives and work is not only incumbent upon us, I do believe it is inscribed in our very souls, if only we will allow it to be revealed. The work that Professor Grimm's Religious Freedom and Business Foundation and all the organizations represented here today are doing to promote the holistic health of individuals and societies seems to me to be fully at one with the role of the vicegerent of God on earth. And it is my prayer that the Empowerment Plus program and all such programs will bear fruit in many countries and communities. And if we can be of help, please do let us know. And if I may, I'd like to conclude with a Muslim prayer for Mary and Jesus, who is known in the tradition as our Master, the Messiah, Jesus, Son of Mary. This prayer is based on the Muslim blessings known as salawat. The spiritual economy of salawat is that to the extent that you invoke blessings upon the designated holy ones, to that extent, divine blessings flow into the world through the designated holy ones. So I'll give you the English first, and if I may, I'll finish with the Arabic, and that's it. Our God, send tremendous blessings and gracious peace upon our Master, the Messiah, Jesus, Son of Mary, and upon his mother, with every breath, in every instant, to the extent of all that you, O God, know. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala al-Masih, Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam wa ala ummihi. Salatan azimatan wa salaman kareeman. في كل نفس ولمحة بعدد كل معلوم لك يا الله. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayer. You know, the spirit of this forum continues to be one of open dialogue and debate on practical methods to effectively reach the poorest of the poor. Clearly, we need mutual understanding and respect to achieve this goal, and we appreciate your perspective and providing us with your wonderful presentation. Both of you, thank you very much.